Friday, 5 p.m. The lilies from the funeral were still on my hall table when my son slammed the kitchen table and said, "You're next, Mom." I thought grief was talking. Until I saw the papers. My name was wrong by one letter. Ruth Ellen Henderson. I have never been an Ellen. That one letter saved me. My husband, Tom, was a shop teacher who could fix a drawer with a pocket knife and a prayer. He also left me one key in a red Folgers can on the porch rail, blue painter's tape, block letters, Box 211, 5th and Main. I walked to the bank alone. Cold vault, brass table. Inside the box, a trust with our house in it and a letter from Tom. Love needs edges. If anyone rushes you to sign, say no. Call Jane. So I called attorney Jane Clark. She said, "Come now, alone, don't sign anything." At the Bluebird Diner, while my son ordered a beer for the nerves, Deputy Hargrove walked in like he was buying pie and said my son's full name. He served the papers. Calm. Firm. My son called me weak. Then he said it again. "You're next." Maybe. Next to be safe. Next to read the fine print. Next to open a box my husband hid with love and edges. This is how a mother keeps her house when grief turns into pressure, a name turns into a trap, and a penny with an X points to the truth. I'll show you the key, the box, the deputy, the judge, and the rules that saved my life. The last morning of Tom's life began with an argument about blueberries. We were at the kitchen table, the sunlight catching the dust like a hand had sifted powdered sugar over our laminate, and I told him the Kroger brand was on sale, and he said, "Ruthie, I don't care what the label says. Those California berries taste like cardboard. If I'm going to be a man of 72, I want the good ones, and I will pay the extra $2. I told him he was dramatic for a shop teacher. He told me I was stubborn for a church lady. Then we laughed and decided we'd split the difference and buy one of each and do a taste test like judges at the county fair. He kissed me on my forehead and patted the beagle and headed out to the garage to sand a cedar birdhouse he was making for Pastor Elaine's husband. He never came back in a way that a person comes back. There was the sound of a body hitting concrete and the sound of a metal can falling over. There was the sound a woman makes when she knows, and it came out of me before I even saw him. I called 911. I pushed on his chest with the heel of my hand like the Red Cross lady taught us at church. I said, "Stay with me, Tom," like it was a spell you cast in a fairy tale. They took him to Miami Valley Hospital and did their best. I did my worst, which is to say I sat there and tried not to drown in the space between his last breath and my next one. By 2 in the afternoon, the doctor with kind eyes told me what I already knew. Heart, quick, no pain, he said. I nodded and signed the sheet and walked out into the parking lot and saw the sky the exact shade of the berries Tom liked and thought it was a cruel trick for a sky to look that pretty when a man like that had been here at breakfast and now was nowhere I could touch. You know how the next days go. The phone and the doorbell become tag team wrestlers. The women from church appear with ham loaves and green bean casseroles and too many Jell-O salads with pretzels in them because God bless Ohio. Someone finds Tom's old Reds cap and props it on the mantle next to the urn. Men show up in clean jeans to lift anything heavy so I don't have to. Mrs. Boone brings folding chairs from her basement and a bouquet of Kroger lilies that make the house smell like a florist shop at graduation time. Our son Aaron was wonderful that first stretch. Gentle hands, "Mom, sit." He took every hug like a shield. He made coffee and answered my phone and greeted people at the door with his head tilted in that way he had as a little boy when he took his cues from my face. He told funny stories about Tom's bad whistling. He handed napkins to strangers when the tears got him. He kissed my cheek and said I could sleep and he'd handle it. I let him. I was so tired that even breathing felt like dragging a log with a rope. The day of the wake, Aaron wore a shirt with buttons, and he looked me full in the face and said, "I'll take care of you now." I nodded like a woman in a movie, brave and beautiful. I did not notice, not then, the sharpness in his jaw or the way his eyes held just a fraction too long on the envelope with the checkbook. I did not notice because I did not want to. There have been signs, and I won't pretend there weren't. When Aaron was little, he was sweetness itself, all dimples and cowlicks and shoelace Velcro that he ripped open like applause. He loved maps and could tell you which interstate took you to Cincinnati and which one to Columbus. In high school, he had a way with words that could talk a speeding ticket down to a warning and a broken curfew down to a shrug. After graduation, he floated a bit. Warehouse here, delivery job there, a lady who broke his heart and a bottle that stitched it back in a crooked line. When things went wrong, it was always someone else's fault. The boss who was threatened, the friend who borrowed his debit card, the neighbor who let his dog bark all night and kept him awake. And me, I am ashamed to say, I made casseroles and explanations in equal measure and told myself that a mother's job was to see the best. If there were nights his eyes went flat and far away, the way my father's used to at the kitchen table after payday, I cleaned the ashtrays and set out the Bibles like I could coax sense back into a man with pot roast and scripture. The morning after the wake, the house was a battlefield of kindness. Folded chairs leaned against every wall. The lilies kept being lilies. The beagle, poor fool, barked at the sound of his own bark. I wanted to take a pie to Pastor Elaine because a woman needs something to do with her hands when her heart has nowhere to go. I went to the little hook by the key rack and found it empty. It was not empty the night before. I checked my purse. Not there. I checked my coat pocket. Not there. "Aaron," I called, half laugh, half habit, "did you move my keys?" He was in Tom's recliner with his feet up, a picture of leisure, except for the tightness in his mouth. From now on, I decide where you go, Mom. I laughed like it was a joke told too early in the morning. "Honey, hand me the keys." "No," he said, and the word landed on the wood of our kitchen table and made a sound I didn't recognize. "You can't be running around. You don't think right after somebody dies, I'll handle the bills and calls. We're consolidating accounts. I need you to sign a couple forms so I can protect you." He laid papers on the kitchen table, typed up, sticky notes marking where to sign. My full name spelled out, Ruth Ellen Henderson. I have never in my life been an Ellen. My middle name is Elaine. My sister is named for our mother, and I am named for my grandmother's best friend. My eyes floated over the letters and landed on that one wrong letter, and the wrongness of it rang like a bell only I could hear. "Aaron," I said softly, "you spelled my name wrong." He didn't blink. "It's a typo. Doesn't matter." "It matters to me," I said. My voice was buttering a biscuit. "We'll have Pastor Elaine look these over." He leaned close, and I smelled the sweet, rot breath of a man who drank the night's leftover beer before the coffee was brewed. "Pastors don't do paperwork. I do." He gathered the papers into a careful stack like a dealer who dealt this hand 100 times. "We'll go to the bank at 2. He stepped outside to smoke. My hand started shaking the way a woman shakes after a tornado when she finally has a room to sit down in. I reached for the sugar bowl and sent it to the floor.
It shattered like birdshot. I'd bent with a dustpan and saw the first clue God sent me, a penny under the toe kick, with a Sharpie X on it. Tom used to mark strip screws with Sharpie X's, but he never marked money. There it was, a little copper wink, telling me to look with Tom's eyes, not my tired ones. I heard him as clearly as if he'd walked in with sawdust on his sleeve. "If you can't find it, Ruthie, check the coffee can. We keep a Folgers tin on the porch rail for bent nails and screws and loose change. Tom loves his Folgers tin like a man loves a tackle box." I hobbled out there in my slippers, the beagle making question marks with his head. The red lid had a little notch cut into it, another Tom trick. Inside, beneath a hinge and a handful of screws and 3 pennies stuck together with some old sweet tea, was a safe deposit key wrapped in blue painter's tape. On the tape, in Tom's careful block letters, the kind that made his shop students think he could write with a ruler, were 4 words and a number. Box 211, 5th and Main. Under the key was a phone number in pencil, faint as a whisper, but there. I knew it. It was on the fridge magnet with the scales of justice that came in the mail. Clark and Willis, attorneys at law. Under the magnet for a year, Tom had kept a postcard with an eagle and the words, "Keep your papers in order," because Tom liked things squared away in the same way he liked a corner cut at a true 45. I called the number, standing in the laundry room where the beagle wouldn't give me away with his detective bark. A woman answered with a voice that sounded like she made lists for fun and had a pie cooling somewhere. "Clark and Willis?" I asked. "Is there a Jane Clark there? My husband was Tom Henderson. He's passed." There was a little inhale on the other end, the kind you make when a name lands that you know. "Mrs. Henderson, this is Jane." The way she said my name made me hold the phone with both hands. "I am sorry about Tom. He asked me to set something up last year. Do you have the key he left you?" "I do," and my voice broke on the last word like a key meeting a lock. "Then listen closely," she said. "Please come to the bank now. Alone, if you can. If anyone insists on coming with you, don't go. Do not sign anything today. Do you understand?" I did. I understood more in that moment than I had understood in a month of casseroles and lilies. I put the key in my pocket and walked back into the kitchen as Aaron came in from the porch, grinding his cigarette into one of my Tom saucers like he owned the place God himself had watched me mop for 45 years.
"Let's get lunch first," I said, cheerful as a waitress. "Bluebird Diner, patty melt. I can't sign anything hungry." He smiled at that. I took a purse I never take, the one with the tiny zipper where I put my babysitting money when I was a girl. We drove to the Bluebird in Tom's truck because Aaron had my keys. The diner opens onto 5th Street. I parked where Aaron couldn't see the bank. He ordered a beer for the nerves, and I said I needed to wash my hands. I went down the hall and through the back door into the alley that smells like onions and old promises, and crossed to 5th and Main like a woman who had practiced this move in her mind. The safe deposit vault is colder than a church in January. The clerk had sympathy eyebrows and didn't ask questions she didn't need answers to. Box 211 came out like a drawer and slid onto a little brass table. My hands are not steady anymore. I peeled the painter's tape back like I was unwrapping a present I didn't want. Inside the box were documents with thick paper and the weight of thought. On top was a letter in Tom's block hand. "Ruth, if I go first, you'll be tempted to keep the peace with our boy. Don't. The house is in the trust now to protect you and him from himself. If anyone asks you to sign it away, say no and call Jane. Remember, love needs edges. T." Under the letter were copies of a trust I had never heard of because Tom knew me well enough to know I would argue if it felt like planning for bad luck.
The trust held the house and the car and a modest IRA from years of buying the cheap paints for the wood shop and saving the difference. There were durable powers of attorney naming me for Tom, and nobody for me but me. There was a list of people Tom trusted: Pastor Elaine, our bank manager at First Federal, and Jane Clark. I cried onto legal paper with the quiet of a woman in a library. I pressed the letter to my chest and felt Tom's block letters through my blouse like Braille for the broken-hearted. If you are loved by a sensible man, you take it for granted sometimes. It is one thing to be loved by someone who says pretty words. It is another to be loved by a man who wraps a key in blue tape and writes your name exactly how it's spelled and thinks to notch a Folger's lid. I walked to Clark and Willis, where the receptionist handed me a cup of water like you hand something to a child who has been running. Jane Clark has what I call pastor eyes: kind, observant, not fooled by theater. She sat me down and spread the papers like a dealer and pointed with a pen. We went through the trust, we went through the deed, we went through what to say if anyone pressured me to sign a quitclaim. She said a sentence I have never heard spoken in a way I believed until then. When someone wants power over you, they often wrap it in the words, "I'm protecting you." Our county courthouse does not look like television. It looks like linoleum that knows every shoe in town and coffee that tastes like yesterday. But that afternoon, in that unremarkable place, Jane filed what needed filing, and a deputy I would come to know as Hargrove took a stack of papers with seriousness written into his jaw and said he'd serve Aaron at the Bluebird. When I walked back into the diner, Aaron had a second beer and a look that could slice bread. "Where'd you go?" I said. "Bathroom. You boys talk too loud. It runs a woman right out of a room." He laughed because he liked when I said "you boys." He liked believing he was a boy when the man in him scared himself. We ordered patty melts. He asked for the papers. I said I'd lost my pen. He went to the counter to borrow one. Deputy Hargrove walked in like he was buying pie and said my son's full name out loud and served him papers with the courtesy of a man who has learned that respect doesn't make you any less firm. Aaron exploded. He called me naive and then a word I won't repeat because I don't believe in putting certain dirt in the air. The deputy stood still. He didn't put a hand on his gun. He didn't puff up. He just let my son discover that the room would hold him even if he didn't hold himself. And somehow, the lack of a fight cut through the fury. Aaron stossed off, and the beagle didn't bark because the beagle was at home sleeping on Tom's chair like he'd finally won. That evening, Aaron pounded on my door long enough for Mrs. Boone to film through her blinds. Hargrove came back with another deputy named Ramos and told Aaron he could choose: leave for the night or spend it in county. He left, gravel spitting from under his tires like the driveway had things to say. At 3 a.m, I sat on my kitchen floor eating the corner of a brownie someone had left and reading Tom's letter until the paper went soft at the folds. I pressed the words, "Love needs edges," with my thumb and felt a kind of heat come up through the ink like Tom was a man who could lay a hand across years and tell me to stand up straight. The days that followed were a chorus of firm kindness. Jane called Pastor Elaine and the bank and the locksmith. We changed the locks. We moved the checkbook to a bank where they give you a lollipop at the counter for no good reason. I took it and cried into it in the parking lot because sometimes victory tastes like sugar and salt at the same time.
Aaron left voicemails. "You picked a lawyer over your own son. Dad would hate you. You're next, Mom. Next to be alone. Next to be scammed. Next to be put in a home." The words slid through me like knives you don't see until the cut stings. He knew which threats a woman swallows in the middle of the night and hears again in the shower. Jane told me to save every message. Pastor told me to bring cobbler to Thursday night group. I did both. One afternoon, Aaron came with a notary he found on Facebook and a quitclaim deed printed on paper that smelled like the inside of a cheap office. The girl looked 19 and wore a perfume that made my eyes water. Aaron squeezed my wrist under the table with fingers that once wrapped around a bat at T-ball and now felt like fence posts. "Sign," he said low. "We'll put it back later." There is a second clue Tom left me without meaning to. He used to say, "Real help doesn't mind waiting." I pushed the paper back. Any helper who needs me to hurry is not helping me. The notary packed up so fast she knocked a pen to the floor. Aaron stared at me like he was trying to learn the alphabet of me all over again, like he suddenly realized I had a shape. Something hard and scared flickered across his face. "You think you're stronger than me now?" he said. I didn't answer. There are questions you don't fuel. Hargrove answered by tapping on the screen door just then, because Jane is the kind of lawyer who reads the part you sign and then calls the sheriff before you need him. When court day came, the sky was cold and gray with that wet Ohio feeling that gets into bones and makes old scars say hello. I wore the blue dress Tom liked and the shoes that don't pinch. The courthouse coffee tasted like it had been made the day before and warmed on a radiator. The judge asked questions like a man reading a map. Have there been threats? Any attempts to control finances? Substance use? I answered yes and yes and yes. The truth is not a weapon. It's a compass. Aaron stood across the room in a clean shirt, and for a second, all I could see was the boy who cried when his goldfish died. Then he smirked, and I saw the man who grabbed my wrist and called me a name in my own kitchen. His public defender said grief had put him in a spin. Grief had done a lot of things to a lot of people I love. It never wrote my middle name wrong to rush a deed. The judge said a sentence I wish I could cross-stitch on a pillow and hand out in the church lobby. Grief does not give you the right to erase your mother. He granted a year-long protection order with conditions: no contact without counsel, alcohol treatment, boundaries monitored by probation. He offered drug port. Aaron rolled his eyes. Then he looked at me, and for 1 second, the room got small, and I wanted to run down and say, "Forget all of this. We'll go home and figure it out at the kitchen table like we do." But Tom's letter was in my pocket, and some loves demand you grow a spine to match your heart. I went back to my quiet house and made pot roast by muscle memory. I sat on the porch, and the beagle put his heavy head on my knee and sighed like he'd built the railroad. I took a binder from the shelf and put a bright orange label on it that said, "If I'm in the hospital," because I know my future and I'm not precious about it. I called a home health aide named Sylvia to come Tuesdays and Thursdays because I am done telling myself I'm fine when I am tired to the bone. 2 months later, Jane called to say Aaron had checked into residential treatment after a probation officer nudged the judge. He wanted to talk to me, through her, with pastor present, at church, in the daylight. We met in the basement that smells like coffee and old hymnals. He looked younger, like a man recovered from a long flu. He cried, I cried. Pastor put a box of Puffs Plus between us like it was communion. He said, "I hate that you had to protect yourself from me." I said, "I do too. But thank you for making me do it."
We wrote rules on an index card. No surprise visits, no night conversations, no keys, no cash, no quick signatures. Meetings through Jane. If he wanted to see me, we picked times in public places. If he needed money, he asked the treatment center to budget it, not me. He lives across town with a sober roommate named Tyler, who drives a drywall truck and looks like every nice boy I prayed Aaron would make friends with when he was 12. People ask me how a woman can stand up to her own son and not break into pieces that blow down the street. I tell him this. I did break, but I broke along the lines Tom drew for me. Edges he left, like a carpenter leaves pencil marks you can sand off later once the cut is true. I joined a little group at church we call Safe Porch. We drink coffee that tastes like fellowship, and we tell the truth out loud where the truth can hear itself and stand up straighter. We practice saying sentences women our age were not taught in school. No, not today. I'll have my attorney look. We can talk when you're sober. I will always love you from a place where I am safe. When Aaron was little, we'd go to the Montgomery County Fair, and he'd drag me to the Midway and beg for a goldfish in a bag. He'd carry it like a lantern all the way home, his small hands careful, his eyes wide with responsibility. He'd promised to feed it and clean the bowl and keep it alive forever. And because he was a boy, he believed forever was a thing a person could do with his bare hands. We buried those fish under the maple tree one by one, shoebox by shoebox, until he learned that even with promise and care and a prayer, some things still die. I think of that sometimes when I want to make the world safe for him with my body. I cannot. What I can do is make my porch safe for me, so he has a place to walk up to when the world he steps into knocks him down. The year after Tom died, I planted tomatoes like red Christmas ornaments along the back fence. I learned how to use the little gas can without smelling like gasoline all afternoon. The Beagle and I made a truce about squirrels. I made a list of numbers to call when the dryer makes us sound like rattlesnakes. I wrote down what bills are on auto pay and which are not, what password goes to what, where the car title is, where the spare key hides. I taped a copy into the orange binder. I showed the binder to Jane and to Pastor and to Mrs. Boone. Because I have learned that secrecy serves the ones who want to move fast, and I am done being quick for somebody else's comfort. On Thursdays, Sylvia comes and scolds the Beagle for stealing her sock. She is a woman with hands like small shovels and a laugh like a kettle. She watches me take my pills from a little plastic tray like I am a person worth keeping track of. When I start to say, "I'm fine," she looks at me until I stop. Every woman needs a Sylvia if she can get one, a witness who isn't fooled by your brave act. One Sunday in September, Aaron came to church with a sponsor. He stood in the parking lot where the teenagers stand to smoke when they think we can't see. He kicked at a crack in the asphalt and said, "I'm sorry." I said, "I know." He said, "You could have signed." I said, "I could have, but your father taught me how to read the grain of wood." We laughed at that, and it felt like a window cracked in an overheated room. We're not fixed. Let me say that the way I would tell you the weather. We are not fixed. Some afternoons the phone rings, and it's a number I don't know, and my stomach drops, and I have to go hold onto the washer like it's a railing. Some nights I hear heavy steps in my sleep and sit straight up, and the house is empty but for the Beagle snoring like a freight train. Some mornings, Aaron sends a funny meme about the Reds, and I write back a heart, and a ribbon of relief untangles in my chest. Healing is ugly as much as it is beautiful. It looks like forms in triplicate and a woman sitting in a bank alone with a lollipop. It looks like a man in a meeting in a basement with coffee gone thick on the burner and hope hanging above the folding chairs like a good smell. On the anniversary of Tom's passing, I took a slice of peach cobbler out to the porch. The wind brought me the smell of somebody grilling 2 streets over. The Beagle flopped on my feet like a warm purse. I took Tom's letter out of the envelope and set my plate on top of it because I wanted the weight of something sweet, keeping down the weight of something hard. I read the sentence again. Love needs edges. I said it out loud for the bees. I said it into my hands like warm water. I said it to the air where Tom might hear me if there's any system in this world that allows it. Sometimes I play a little game with myself where I imagine telling my younger self what to do the day Aaron was born. "You will be tempted," I would whisper into her hospital hair, "to equate love with softness. You will be tempted to keep him a boy by smoothing his path until he never learns to stand on a rough one. You will be tempted to call control care because it sounds gentler on a pillow.
Don't. Teach him that his mother is a wall that does not move when the wind does. Teach him that no is a complete sentence said with a smile. Teach him that when he slams a door, it stays closed until he can open it with a better face. Teach yourself first, because he will learn by watching how you treat yourself more than by listening to what you preach.
The penny with the X is still taped inside the Folgers lid. Sometimes when the house is too quiet, I go out and lift that lid like I'm checking on a sleeping child. I am not sentimental about coffee cans, but this one is a holy thing now. And if that sounds dramatic for a church lady, so be it. God hid a key in a tin full of screws for a woman who was about to choose peace over safety, and I'm going to honor that with a little reverence. A year and a half after the court order, we went back in to see the judge. Aaron had proof of meetings and P-tests and a job at the drywall company. He stood straighter than I'd seen him stand since he was 11 and wanted to impress Coach Downey at tryouts. The judge asked me what I wanted. I wanted to say I wanted my husband back and my boy 9 years old again and my father sober at the kitchen table asking me about my spelling test. I said I wanted the order modified so we could talk on Sundays after service with pastor present and dinners on Wednesdays at the Bluebird with Aaron's sponsor. The judge nodded. He kept the financial boundaries and the no night visits and the no quick signatures, like he recognized my blood pressure from across the bench. We celebrated with pie at the Bluebird. Aaron didn't drink. He drank coffee that he made a face at like it was a dare. He told me about a drywall seam that made him proud. He told me about a guy in his house who snores like a broken motorcycle. He asked about the beagle like he missed the old pest. I told him the beagle had taken to sleeping on Tom's recliner like a man who paid the mortgage. We laughed, the kind of laugh you saved after a storm when you've counted the shingles and the house still stands. I do not know what he will be to me in 5 years. There is a humility in that sentence I could not have spoken at 30. But I know this. If he knocks at my door with that flat look in his eyes, I will call Jane and Hargrove before I call my son back into my kitchen. If he comes with a sober mouth and empty hands, I will pour him coffee and lay out Puffs Plus and listen. If he tries to hurry me, I will slow down until the clock itself complains. I will not sign anything except love, and that one I will sign with a pen that has my name spelled right. When my father was old and mean and sorry, not in that order, he came to my house one Thanksgiving and knocked 3 times like the police. I didn't want to let him in. I did. He stood in my kitchen, eyes sharp as tin, and he said, "You always were hard, Ruth." It was not a compliment. I wish I could go back and say thank you. Hard has saved my life more than sweet ever did. Hard like a backbone, hard like a boundary, hard like the line a judge draws when your heart is too wobbly to hold a straight one. What I say now is gentler. I say firm. Firm gets me where hard sometimes scared me to go. If you are a woman my age, and you are listening with your whole body because something about this sounds like your kitchen table, hear me plain. If someone moves fast, wants your signature, takes your keys, tells you it's for your own good, put your hand over your heart and feel it work. That beating was not given to you so you could hand your life to the loudest person in the room. Call a Jane. Call a pastor with eyes that see. Call a bank manager who knows your face. Call the sheriff, and don't be ashamed if your voice shakes. Your safety is not disloyalty. It is stewardship. The beagle is snoring. Mrs. Boone has her porch light on, always too early. The chimes are doing that racket that made Tom threaten to take him down 100 times and never once get the ladder. I am going to go inside and put the binder back where I keep it and brush my teeth and say out loud for the air, love needs edges. It does not make you less kind. It makes your kindness a place where people can land without falling through. One day,
When I'm gone, the Folgers can will sit there and mean nothing to someone with no memory of a man who used blue tape like prayer. If that day comes, I hope whoever finds it lifts the lid and smiles at the penny with the X and thinks, somebody loves somebody here enough to be wise. That will be enough. That and a boy who learned the alphabet of his mother all over again and spelled her name right and found his way to Wednesday dinners without a drink in his hand.
If you are still listening, bless you. I hope your coffee is hot and your porch is safe and your name is spelled right on every piece of paper in your house. And if it isn't, I hope this puts a key in your pocket. I hope you check your coffee can. I hope you write down your numbers and your wishes in a bright orange binder and tell 3 people where it is. I hope when someone tells you, from now on, I decide, you remember a shop teacher who hid a key and a woman who found it, and you say, kindly and firmly, no, son, I decide to be safe. Last week, Aaron called through Jane like he's supposed to and asked if I wanted to see the new mural he helped paint at a bakery downtown. We went in the afternoon when the sun makes the sidewalk look like a fresh sheet of paper. He stood in front of a wall of color that looked like sunrise and said, I did the edges. I said, of course you did. The baker brought out a tray of cookies and the whole place smelled like butter and hope. I took one and put it in my purse for Pastor because that's the woman I am. I watched my son's hands, the same ones that once grabbed my wrist, hold a paint rag and a water bottle. I watched him tilt his head and take in his work and stand there with a posture I recognized from the boy who carried goldfish home like lanterns. I stood next to him, not too close, close enough. On the way home, if you're still listening, bless you. I hope your coffee is hot and your porch is safe and your name is spelled right on every piece of paper in your house. And if it isn't, I hope this puts a key in your pocket. I hope you check your coffee can. I hope you write down your numbers and your wishes in a bright orange binder and tell 3 people where it is. I hope when someone tells you, from now on, I decide, you remember a shop teacher who hid a key and a woman who found it, and you say, kindly and firmly, no, son, I decide to be safe. Last week, Aaron called through Jane like he's supposed to and asked if I wanted to see the new mural he helped paint at a bakery downtown. We went in the afternoon when the sun makes the sidewalk look like a fresh sheet of paper. He stood in front of a wall of color that looked like sunrise and said, I did the edges. I said, of course you did. The baker brought out a tray of cookies and the whole place smelled like butter and hope. I took one and put it in my purse for Pastor because that's the woman I am. I watched my son's hands. The same ones that once grabbed my wrist, hold a paint rag and a water bottle. I watched him tilt his head and take in his work and stand there with a posture I recognized from the boy who carried goldfish home like lanterns. I stood next to him. Not too close. Close enough. On the way home, I drove. He didn't argue. We sat in the truck in my driveway a minute because the quiet can be as loud as anything, and he said, do you think Dad sees me? I hope so, I said. I hope he sees you and says, that's my boy doing the edges. We went inside. The beagle went insane like he had to file a report. I put Tom's letter back in his envelope and then I took it back out because habits have a mind of their own. I smoothed it and read the line and put it back, and then I went to make dinner because what else is a woman supposed to do at 5:30 on a Tuesday when the world is not fixed but is holding? Some evenings, the Reds are on the radio and I sit on the porch and the neighbor kids ride their scooters like they're training for something, and Mrs. Boone calls over that the mailman wore shorts in March like it's a sign of the end times. I take a breath and it goes all the way down. I am grateful for the boring news of ordinary days. I'm grateful for a judge who said a thing worth stitching. I'm grateful for an attorney who files paper like a deacon passes the offering. I'm grateful for a pastor who brings puffs to a fight. I'm grateful for a dog who snores and a neighbor who films and a bank teller who said, "Take 2 lollipops," when she saw my hand shake. There are nights I miss Tom so much I set 2 plates out and laugh at myself. There are mornings I find a screw on the counter and wonder what it came from and decide to let the house confess in its own time. There are afternoons I pull into the Bluebird and the waitress says, "Pelty melt?" like the day never ended. And I say yes and tip too much because sometimes a woman needs to feel generous to remember she still can be. I promise no chapters and no sound effects. Just one woman's voice, steady as I can make it. If you walked with me this whole way, thank you. If any part of you feels a key in your pocket that wasn't there before, don't ignore it. The world will call you dramatic. Be dramatic. Call your Jane. Call your Hargrove. Call your Pastor Elaine. Make your binder. Tape your penny. Plant your tomatoes. Keep your porch light the color it needs to be. And when you have to, say no like you mean to see tomorrow. That is how love lasts. That is how a woman like me keeps her house. That is how I saved my life the day my own son said, "From now on, I decide." And I picked up a key wrapped in blue tape and remembered that God gave me hands for my own doorknob.